Well, thank you for joining us today on Ask the Mayor program. Today we're going to be bringing you a three-part series from the Georgia Municipal Association's annual convention in Savannah, Georgia. The title of this program that I moderated was A Practical Side of Governing. So please stay tuned for today's Ask the Mayor program. Well, thank you for joining us today. Today's program, which is a three-part series, you're going to have some of our state legislators participate in a program and a question and answer program dealing with the important issues before all of the citizens who live not only in Douglasville but throughout the state of Georgia. Our guest panel for this program was Senator Don Balfour, Senator Chip Rogers, the Mayor of Dallas, Mr. Boyd Austin, and the City Manager from Columbus, Georgia, Isaiah Hughley, and finally the City Manager from Gainesville was Brian Schuler. This was an extremely talented panel, had varying views on different issues, but as we go through the three-part series, you will see some of their views and how they answer some of the questions that are presented to them that really deal with the future of how cities and how communities develop over the next several years. So I appreciate you being with us today. At this particular convention, each year most of the elected officials from throughout Georgia, municipal city officials, attend an annual convention. It's always in Savannah. There are some important issues that come up. Of course, there's also training for newly elected officials. But there are other things that we as a city government here in Douglasville participate in because we believe that the more we can do on a state level, the more benefit it's going to be to you and I as citizens that live in the city of Douglasville. I actually was the chair of the Metro Atlanta Mayors Association during last year, and at the end of the year when the new president was sworn in, we have a luncheon there, and we have that on another series that we're going to be bringing you later. Also, I serve as a board member on the Georgia Municipal Association, so there are a number of things that we as elected officials are involved in, as I said earlier, that we believe are important and make all of us, all 8 of us, really have the ability to serve you better. And that's what this is all about. So I hope you enjoy this program. There are, as you will see, some pretty pointed questions, all dealing with issues that are important. A lot of these issues were not decided in the last session of the General Assembly. Some of these issues will be coming back up again this year. So I encourage you to stay abreast of the issues that are happening under the Gold Dome each year because they're all very, very important to us, all of us who live here in Douglasville. And again, thank you for joining us on today's program.
I'm a single mother of 2 kids. He dropped off for a whole month. I just get frustrated because in any way that I talk to him, it just doesn't go through his head. I didn't give up. There's always hope. They'll snap out of it.
To help your teen graduate, call 1-877-4A-KID or go to boostup.org.
I have the honor this afternoon of introducing our closing session, a session intended to focus on the real and practical side of government. It's not always pretty. It is usually not easy, but it certainly is worthwhile given the real impact city leaders have on the lives of the people we serve. Over the next hour or so, we're going to be able to hear the perspectives of some of three city officials who live and breathe these issues daily. The session is going to be moderated by Mayor Vicki Thompson of the City of Douglasville. Mayor Thompson serves on the GMA Board of Directors, is the immediate past chair of the GMA Municipal Government Committee, and also served as chair of the Metro Atlanta Mayors Association. With that, I will turn the program over to Mayor Vicki Thompson of Douglasville. Mayor.
Well, thank you, Ken. I appreciate that, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. And I would also like to welcome everyone who is with us today. My job is, as the moderator of this distinguished panel we have, and I will do the best I can to keep us on task today and to move the discussion along, talking about those issues that Ken just referenced. I suspect there will be a few questions from the audience later on, and we do have some mics set up that if we have some time at the end of the session, we would certainly like to open the floor for those questions. So let's get right to it today. Let me introduce our first panelist. He is no stranger to GMA. Last year, he was presented our highest award, the GMA Key Citizen Award, and has had a distinguished career in the State Senate. He currently serves as the chair of the powerful Senate Rules Committee and is one of the key members of the leadership of the State Senate. Senator Balfour is from Snellville, an area in Gwinnett County, and when he's not attending to his many Senate duties, he's an executive with the Waffle House Corporation located in Norcross. Please welcome Senator Don Balfour. Our next panelist is the State Finance Committee. Is the chairman of the State Finance Committee and is considered to be one of the busiest members of the State Senate, given his array of committee appointments. He was first elected to the Georgia House in 2002 and won his current Senate seat in 2004. Senator Rogers received his undergrad degree from Georgia Tech and his graduate degree from Georgia State. Please welcome Senator Jim Rogers. Our next panelist is Mayor Boyd Austin of Dallas, who currently serves as the chairman of the GMA Transportation Committee and serves on GMA's Legislative Policy Council. Mayor Austin is a strong advocate both for water planning and transportation and also finance planning. He is a successful businessman in Dallas and a strong advocate for cities. Please welcome Mayor Austin. Our two final panelists are veteran city managers who bring a staff perspective to this panel. First, Isaiah Hughley is the current president of the Georgia City County Management Association and also serves on the GMA Board of Directors. He is a city manager in Columbus, the first consolidated local government in the state of Georgia. He has a long history of local government management and brings a unique perspective to today's deliberations. Given that Columbus has both a constitutionally authorized property tax assessment freeze, but also has a millage cap. Isaiah is also married to State Representative Carolyn Hughley. Please welcome Isaiah Hughley. Last but not least is Brian Schiller. Brian is a city manager in Gainesville, and he currently serves as the chairman of the GMA Revenue and Finance Committee. He also serves on the GMA Board of Directors and is a member of the GMA Legislative Policy Council. His city faces many of the challenges that economic hub cities of similar size and responsibilities around the state face. Please welcome Brian Schiller. I do want to thank each of our panelists for taking the time out of their schedule to participate in today's session. There are a number of issues that are important to Georgia cities. I hope we can talk openly about these issues today. My questions are not designed, and I'll have a series of questions to kick us off today. They're not designed to be combative to anyone, but are merely questions that are at the forefront of our discussion about how to provide services on a municipal level. As was noted by Mayor Steele, I serve on the GMA Legislative Policy Council, and I developed most of today's questions around those policy statements from that committee, and also from the panel discussion yesterday with Senator Johnson and Representative Porter. So let's get started. The first thing that's near and dear to many of us in city government is home rule. And so my first question is about home rule. The Georgia Constitution specifically provides for home rule for counties and cities. Over the last few years, with the introduction of various pieces of legislation that would have virtually eliminated home rule, most city elected officials are beginning to become more concerned about their ability to provide services had these bills actually became law. I would like to ask each of our panelists to comment on this situation and offer solutions to what some believe is an attack on local government's funding ability necessary to provide the most basic level of service to our citizens. We'll go in order, or just anyone that would like to answer first.
Well, let me just say good afternoon to each of you, and I do appreciate the opportunity to serve on this panel. I believe in home rule, and I'm glad that the Georgia Constitution recognizes home rule. As you talk about home rule, I think about the threat that we faced during this legislative session of losing home rule. I think back over my 23 years career with the city of Columbus, and never before in my history, my 23-year history, have I had the concerns that I had this legislative session as it relates to the threat of devastating our city and cities and counties across the state. I spent more time as the city manager this year than ever before, staying on the telephone, making phone calls, staying online, monitoring what was going on in the legislative session, calling my wife, who's in the state house 3 and 4 times a day during the session just to make sure nothing had happened. And so this is the first year that I've been faced with this. Now, I believe in home rule, and I do believe there should be a balance. With the proposed tax reform, the great plan that was before us, that was brought last year on the last day of the legislative session, as I understand it, and we had nothing in writing, nothing to review, to look at. We heard a number of speeches about how great this was going to be for the state of Georgia, and what it was going to do for the state of Georgia. And I know that there were presentations from one county or one city to another across the state, and we would try and capture and follow the news as to what was stated in that county, but by the time it got to the next county, it was different. And of course, we were concerned, and so I believe in home rule, and I do believe there should be a balance. The state, I think, if they had passed the great plan in the original, according to the original introduction, it would have taken away the balance. I believe that there should be balance there, because some cities or counties may sometime go too far, and we need the state there to make sure that they don't go too far. But I believe the great plan was just impractical, and it was not tax reform, it was a tax transfer, in that we were going to be taxed on all of those services that we were not accustomed to paying taxes on, from haircut to accounting services and so forth and so on. But I believe there should be a balance because sometimes cities or counties may go too far, but this great plan as originally proposed just went too far, and it was going to take away home rule. It was just impractical, and we continue to have concerns about that now and as we go forward, what might happen.
Well, I agree. I think most of us have the same concerns. Senator Balfour?
Let me just say a couple things quickly and let the rest of the analysts also talk. The balance is important. If a city decided that in its city schools it wasn't going to fly the state flag, you'd see us deciding a little bit on a different balance on home rule. If a city decided to redefine marriage different than the state constitution, or outlaw guns, and that's where the balance comes in. If it goes too far on something, you'll see this General Assembly step in. Unfortunately, we step in on other things as well. The Great Plan being one. I'm about to become the incoming president of the National Organization of State Legislators, NCSL. And if I mentioned this in the session the other day, if the federal government came up with this great idea of coming up with a national lottery tax of some type, and that tax would replace all state taxes. And so there'll no longer be any state income tax or sales tax, but don't worry, state legislators, because the federal government's going to give you back from this national tax of whatever it is, give you back to each of your 50 states the amount of money you lost, so don't worry about it. Or we'd be yelling, screaming, squealing, complaining. And to a great extent, that's what we're doing. And even at the end, when it just became a tax on automobiles, we still didn't, as the governor mentioned, and he was correct, we were going to cut X amount of $100 million out of the budget. And we were going to put it on the ballot that we were going to cut X, 600 million, whatever the dollar was. But we weren't, and we were going to let people vote on it. But we weren't going to tell the people where the $600 million in cuts were. We were just going to have them vote on a tax decrease. Well, if you put before the people a vote on, let's get rid of all property tax, sales tax, and income tax. Let's put it all on one ballot. Let's get rid of all the taxes. The people vote for it. Until you told them, well, that gets rid of your police force, and your roads, and your schools, and everything else. And so you have to balance, the Great Plan I don't think was balanced because we were putting a referendum before the people, but we weren't talking about where we were going to cut to $600 or $700 million. As the governor mentioned, if we wanted to cut as the General Assembly last year $700 million out of the budget, we had our bite at the apple. Oh, by the way, we didn't do it.
First of all, thanks again for inviting me here today. This is a great organization. Thank you for what you do for our cities across Georgia, because without your good governance, we would be much worse off in the state, so I do thank you for that. I just am convinced that I just don't want to accept failure on this issue. The idea is to move away from what I believe is a fatally flawed tax system, and there's certain things I do agree with the speaker on, but this is a fatally flawed tax system, a property tax system that was built for a different economy. I think what we need to do, though, and the question pertains to home rule, is come up with a tax system that doesn't tax property, particularly the way that this tax system taxes property, but allows for complete local control. And I know that answer is out there. It's not that we can't come up with this. We just hadn't come to that conclusion yet. One of the things that I worked on last year with Senator Seabaugh and a lot of the people from GMA went to be specifically was a plan that would allow you to, through the collection of local consumption tax, roll back dollar for dollar your property taxes. And those are the things we ought to be looking at, because whether we like it or not, the sales tax or the tax collection system of the next century or the next 50 years is not going to be based on property, and it probably shouldn't be based on property. We are a consumption society, and it ought to be based in some form of consumption. But we can collect consumption taxes and send them back to the cities where they were originally collected without the state taking anything out of it. That's what we ought to be looking at. There has got to be an answer to this problem. I mean, if you go around and talk to the voters, who are the people we all represent, they are furious about the property tax. They're furious about the manner in which it is assessed. They're furious about the wild increases that they can see. If you're from Fulton County, particularly in the commercial side right now, I mean, it is absolutely crazy that somebody's property tax is going up over 1,000% right now in Fulton County. 1,000% in 1 year. I mean, that is a broken, flawed system, and that is a system that needs to be corrected. So I'm not going to accept defeat. It's not the great plan we need, but what we need is a plan that brings the property tax in check, moves us more towards a consumption tax, but allows for that local control, because I am absolutely convinced that if we have point-of-sale technology, and if we actually have the data that is necessary, we know where every single dollar is collected. And if a dollar is collected in the city of Columbus, it ought to go back to the city of Columbus. The state shouldn't be taking their portion of it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about the cities receiving the revenue necessary to run your government, to supply the services that your local voters want you to supply, based upon the revenue you can collect within your city boundaries. And whether that is through a property tax or a sales tax, you ought to have the flexibility to do that. I would imagine most people, if they knew that the sales tax collected in their specific city, like in my city of Woodstock, was going to come back to Woodstock, they would probably say, oh yes, I'd love to do that and get rid of any property tax. So I think it's possible. I don't want to accept defeat on that. And I think that if we can finally move in that direction, the voters are going to be a lot happier. I mean, I know myself, I'd rather go pay that 4, 5, 6, 7 cents when I buy a gallon of gas, so to speak, or even get a haircut. I've never understood that. If I go to get a haircut, which I need one right now, but if I go get a haircut and I buy a bottle of shampoo, I pay a sales tax on it, but I don't pay a sales tax for the lady cutting my hair. It just never has really made any sense to me. But if I knew that money was going to come back into my community and not be eaten up by the state, then I think we'd have a much better system. So I do think that there's, it was a good discussion to have. It was the right road to go down, looking at swapping out property taxes for consumption tax. But we've got to have that information that tells us where that sales tax was derived and the guarantee that it's going to go back to that locality.
Yeah. Mr. Chair? Senator, based on the smiles I saw from our GMA staff over there, I think there's a lot of what you said that we would wholeheartedly agree with and endorse. In fact, one of the measures that you mentioned, Senator Seaball's proposal last year for the sales tax with a rollback is something that we did work for, and balance. I think that's what's very important, and that's one of the cornerstones really of our legislative policies for revenue and finance. You know, when we talk about home rule, what's important is that to remember is that there are over 500 cities in Georgia, and while we all provide some of the same basic services, we're very different in many ways, and we have very different economic conditions in our communities. What might work in my community may not be the best revenue solution for another community. And as long as we can have the opportunity to maintain the diversity of revenue choices that we currently have, I think we can all find some common ground in the issue of tax reform.
Mayor? Well, by the time it got to me, there's been a lot more issues, excuse me, besides the initial question about home rule. The first point I would make is that the reason we are here today and we are celebrating 75 years as an association is it was birthed in the need for cities to have a voice and for cities to be able to act independently. And our General Assembly acted in years past to give us that opportunity through home rule. We don't see many moves for new states to be created or new counties. But after the creation of Sandy Springs, we have seen the floodgates open of people voting to incorporate and create new cities, because that's where they find the basic level of services delivered, and they have the greatest voice in government. So that basic premise, to me, is what home rule is about, is that each individual community, and I stress the term individual, has its own identity, its own priorities. And it's through the structure that we have, a wide-ranging tax structure, that we achieve those goals in each of the local communities. it's hard to come down from the top and issue an edict of change without proper preparation and study. A good point was made by Senator Rogers. Point of sale information. We have fought for years to get the Department of Revenue to come into the 21st century and provide that information. There is apparently no desire or no great desire to do that. Without that, we can't move forward on tax reform and consumption because we don't have adequate numbers to do. I was very fortunate in 2000 to be appointed by Speaker Murphy to the first statewide comprehensive water study committee. We worked for a year and a half all over Georgia. That study committee gave basic principles that was later on the next water committee that 7 years later, in 2008, proposed legislation that became the first statewide water plan. We need that with taxes. We need deliberate, informed, a wide range of participation in the tax structure of this state, deliberations and discussions with elected officials and business leaders as well. We can't have just some cockamamie plan that somebody paid an economist to give him and never hand it on paper to anybody to vet it and pass it. So we ask for reason, but we also ask that our identity as local communities be recognized, and if there was a great problem in a lot of those places, there'd be a lot more hell being raised by folks out there. And the last thing I would say about home rule is I don't believe the General Assembly is the place where local problems ought to be solved on a statewide basis.